How'd you get that cut on your forehead?
I really need to talk to Cassie.
You're losing it, buddy.
Who are you talking to?
You blew it. Now he knows you're Looney Tunes.
I'm advising my client to stop this interview.
I'll ask you again, how did you get that cut on your head? Your blood type is the same as the blood on this t-shirt.
I fell, okay, I fell.
Come on, buddy, do better.
How did you fall?
I really do have a lot of work to do. Tomorrow is a very big day.
Then talk to me.
Fuck,
Cut
don't
to the
shut
head
up
really
now.
bleed out.
Come on.
Insist we stop the interview.
Come on.
Shut up!
Shut up! I'm fine.
Well, firstly, I think that thing about letting the audience know that there is a resolution and redemption, I actually don't think is a spoiler. I think it is. I mean, it was interesting when you said there are certain genres of things that I stay away from. Mm. And actually, because of the nature of the story, when it is, looks like just a child abduction drama, I know exactly what you meant. And I think it's perfectly fine for people to know that it's so much more than that. So he spoke about it very passionately. I interviewed Abby Morgan on stage a couple of days ago, who's the brilliant writer and creator of this, who you mentioned, wrote scripts for Brick Lane, Iron Lady, Shame, the fabulous Steve McQueen film, Sex Traffic, The Hour, The Split on television. And I said to Abby Morgan, look, it's very hard to describe this. It's basically Sesame Street meets Dog Day Afternoon, isn't it? And she loved that description. Well, of course, because it's, but what I meant was because Dog Day Afternoon is, Sidney Lumet 70s rather than 80s, but Sidney Lumet 70s New York, Brooklyn set crime thriller that's not about the crime. It's about relationships. It's about TV and media and fact and fantasy. And, Abby Morgan loves Tootsie and she loves New York and she had described the thing. She said it's a story of a couple coming apart in a city that's coming apart. And she wrote this after some very, very testing times in her own life. And I mean, I get the sense that she wrote it with a kind of air of, I'm just going to write whatever I want. I've survived all this other stuff. Now I'm just going to write what I want. I mean, it does feel like that, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And even though it's not New York, I think it's Budapest, as I recall, you do get the feeling that you're in the best hands, which I think is one of the things that Benedict was referring to in that piece.
Yeah. So tonally very complicated. I mean, on the one hand, there is the child abduction story. Then there's a story of an addict who's letting everyone down, and that kind of takes us back to Shame. There's the story of, racism in New York. Another disappearance is overlooked, and apparently it's overlooked because, it's not a white kid. There's the story of wealthy parents distanced from their son and daughter-in-law. There's a story of mental illness being endured and overlooked. There's a story of homelessness, of city corruption, slum clearance, money-grabbing development, a descent into the underworld, a kind of, Orpheus story, and at the centre of it all, a marriage falling apart. So there is a lot going on. And then into that, we throw Eric, who is on some level, I suppose, the cousin of the imaginary rabbit in the 1950 film Harvey, with James Stewart. And there's also a touch of A Monster Calls, in as much as it's somebody dealing with a trauma through an imaginary monster, although obviously in this case it's an adult. And there's a key line in it, I think it's Gabby Hoffman's character says, why puppets? And the answer is because they say the things we can't. Mm. And Abby Morgan said that she knew Benedict Cumberbatch could play this role because she'd seen him on stage in Frankenstein. Did you see the Frankenstein when it was him and Johnny Lee Miller?
No, I didn't. And that was the one where they swapped. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, each night one of them would play the monster, one of them would play Dr. Frankenstein, and that was the whole kind of conceit of it. And I think that ties in very nicely to what he's doing here, in as much as you were saying in that interview, he's Vincent and he is Eric, and and then there's the thing about the imaginary friends in the background. Look, this is really well directed by Lucy Forbes. It's got some absolutely brilliant retro jukebox choices on the soundtrack. I mean, there's ABBA in there. There's just the soundtrack alone. I hope at some point somebody produces a compilation of all the tracks that are used on it, because it's a real celluloid jukebox soundtrack. I mean, which I loved, and I imagine you did too.
Yeah, there's a scene. In fact, I meant to mention it, but we ran out of time with Benedict, where he's in a nightclub and he's off his face, but he dances to Gloria by Laura Branigan. And there's
Yes.
my guess is that was always it. It wasn't something that they put in afterwards, like in Saturday Night Fever. You know, he knew what the track was. They're all dancing. He's mouthing the words. And I think that track now will always remind me of Benedict Cumberbatch being off his face in a nightclub that's supposed to be in New York.
Yeah, and I think that sense of everything is there for a purpose is really important, because on the surface of it, this shouldn't work. I mean, it really shouldn't work. It's much too much of a contrivance, and it's much too ambitious. The fact that it does tells you two things. Firstly, that it has a great central performance, and incidentally, Gabby Hoffman is terrific as well. But you believe their marriage is falling. You believe in their marriage. You believe in their marriage falling apart, and you believe in the split, in the kind of the alienation between them and their child. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it is done with enough conviction that even when there is a 7 foot blue puppet in the room, you don't think this is just absurd and silly. What you think is, you get used to it really quickly. I mean, as that clip showed, very quickly, you just get used to the idea. Okay, fine. It's his imaginary friend. It's his, Frankensteinian alter ego. And I spent the whole thing thinking, this really shouldn't work. And the fact that it does work as well as it does is a tribute to the writing, to the way it's directed, to the conviction of the performances, and to the fact that it feels at heart completely organic. It feels like it's the creation of somebody who went, I'm just going to tell the story the way I want to tell it. And I was really surprised by how affecting it was. But like you, I watched all 6 episodes and I binged them in a single thing, because I just couldn't stop. And I thought it was really good.
Yeah, and I think that's proof of how good it is, because I think I could have got away with watching 3 or 4. I think that's fine to do an interview, because in a way you never want to talk about the ending anyway, because you don't want to give anything away. Although I think Benedict did sort of hint towards where that is going. But the fact that you know that it's 6, it's going to stop at 6. If you can find, okay, what else am I going to do? I really want to know how this gets resolved. So yeah, I think it's probably one of the TV series of the year, don't you think?
Oh yeah, no, I mean. And I think it's one of those things that people, if you try and describe it to them, they'll go, I don't know. You say it's either a child abduction thing or it's a thing with it's like Harvey with a 7 foot blue puppet following the person around. But the best way of describing it is just go with it. Just watch it. It will grip you, even if by the end of the second episode you're really not quite sure where it's going. And I completely share your anxiety about certain genres of story. I completely share that, and that's why I don't think that what Benedict Cumberbatch said, and I'm not just saying this because I'm scared that he might punch me again, I don't think that is a spoiler. I think what it is a reassurance that it's not that story.
Eric is new on Netflix. Let us know what you think. Correspondence@kermodeandmayo.com. More in a moment.